So we have with us, Bob Chandler, who is the, business development. Who's with business development, we have Nifty, who is also the project manager on the AIA grant for both wastewater and, water. And we have Megan Powell, she is the manager for the funding asset management for Withers. That's part.
Thank you for,
Oh, God.
so Bob's just passing out a copy of the presentation, so you have something if you want to take notes on. Everything that he has with you, actually. Just a little bit of information.
That's what you're about.
You have a few more copies.
We're fine, go ahead.
All right.
Thank you.
So as Jake said, my name is Megan Powell. I'm the Funding and Asset Management Group at Withers Ravenel. We have Bob Chandler here and DP Cunningham, who is the project. So I'll kick us off. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. It's a pleasure to get to come down to Bald Head Island. I know we were discussing on the ferry on the way over here when we first, we're talking about logistics for today. It was supposed to be pouring down rain today. So we were so excited that we had an opportunity to actually see a little bit of this beautiful island. So we're going to talk about asset inventory assessment grants today, or AIAs. At Withers Ravenel, we do a number of different things for local governments and private businesses, but today we're going to focus on asset management and funding and finance, which is what we are currently doing with the village. We're going to kind of go over everything and talk about the current project, which is underway. So Deepti's going to give you an overview of what AIAs are, what they are not, and then talk a little bit about the project and how it's been going so far. I'll get to chime in a little bit here and there with some funding information, and then we'll kind of finish up today talking about other funding services that may be something that you want to explore as a village moving forward. So I will turn it over to Deepti.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Megan mentioned, my name is Deepti Kunyanam. I'm a senior project manager in the funding and asset management group at Withers Ravenel. I'm also the project manager for the water and sewer AIA projects that we are doing for the village. So really, I would like to go over a little bit, a brief overview of what the AIA is, what is an AMP asset management planning process, and then we'll go over the project related updates. So really starting from like square one, what is an AIA and AMP? What does those abbreviations mean? An AIA is the Asset Inventory and Assessment. It's a grant program by the state, which helps utilities in able to better manage their infrastructure and better manage their assets in a more proactive manner, and as well as their financial needs. An AMP is an asset management plan, which is a product of an AIA project, which has multiple definitions, but to its core, it's basically a consolidated business plan for organizations and utilities to be able to make like informed decisions on how and where to spend their money. As we all know, the asset management planning is it's a step-by-step approach, and utilities face a lot of problems with their aging infrastructure, failing infrastructure, with limited funding, with the pressure from your regulators. So it's really difficult to kind of understand like how you want to prioritize, where you want to put your money, and what time you want to put your money. So it's like a lot of unknowns there. So the asset management planning process basically helps you overcome some of these challenges. And like I said, it's a step-by-step approach. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, basically consists of 5 core components. The first one being like building an asset inventory. What it really means is that kind of like making a list of all what you have with respect to your water and sewer infrastructure. You know, how many pipes you have, how many miles of pipes you have, number of manholes, those kind of things, like an entire list of assets that your water and sewer infrastructure is composed of. And then comes the levels of service. What do you want your assets to achieve? What do you want the assets to perform? So that is basically setting those required or desired levels of service so that your assets are performing to the way how they're supposed to. And then comes the risk analysis. Once we have all that list, once you know where your assets are, what their condition are in, you know what they're supposed to perform, and then you perform a criticality analysis or risk analysis to understand which assets are more critical than the others. Where do you need to have your immediate attention on, like which assets are failing or, near failing, and assets which are fairly new, you know that, you have some time to make sure that they're repaired and we can extend the life of their asset, of the particular asset. And then the fourth component is the decision making, where how much of an operation and maintenance cost that you want to assign for a particular asset. When you want to repair, when you want to replace, when you want to rehabilitate a particular asset. So those are some of the informed decisions that you're going to be making based on the information that has been collected in the previous three components. And then lastly, the funding. Where is the funding coming from? So essentially, this is the asset management framework that helps you understand and makes your organization or utility make those informed decisions to be able to use your money more wisely. So with that, I'm going to go over a little bit about the on the project overview side. This is the project scope of work, task management and grant administration. With those Ravenel is assisting the village with all the grant administration paperwork, with the startup procurement, making sure the payment requests are going smoothly, so we could get paid. And then task 2 is basically the data request and records review. And I'm going to go over each of these tasks in further more detail and the slides coming up. The task 3 is the GIS mapping, which is a deliverable that you're all going to get to basically kind of understand where your assets are located. Task 4 is a condition assessment that is included for the sewer AIA project only, where we'll be doing some CCTV video inspections to understand the condition of a pipe. And then there's the asset management plan itself, where we'll be doing, like I mentioned, the risk analysis to understand which assets you need to prioritize and build those CIP, capital improvement projects, and also include best practices for your operation and maintenance to improve the life of your assets, to extend the life of your assets, thereby improving the overall health of your water and sewer infrastructure. And then lastly, the life cycle model, which kind of gives you a good understanding of your long-term financial needs. And then Megan is going to cover the financial analysis and rate study part of it. So with that, the data request and records review. So currently we are about 90% complete with this task. So what it really means is that in order to build the first step, which is building the asset inventory, we need to know like what is available. So what we did is we collected all the available documentation, drawings, as-bills, record drawings, your existing GIS mapping. We have gathered everything, and now we started building a base GIS file, geodatabase is called. And now we started looking into, okay, we have everything in here, but now what is missing in that, so that we need to send a person out to collect that information so we can fill in those missing gaps. So we have done that, we have summarized that gap analysis has been converted to identify, how much of a field effort is needed to collect all this. For example, if there is a manhole, we know where the manhole is located, but we don't know the information on that, like how deep it is, what is the material, what's the number of pipes that are going into that particular manhole, what is the size, what is the material, and all these kind of things are the things that our field crew collect out in the field. So really the next steps at this point are, like I said, we are near completion to this task, and we are in the process of scheduling that field work, which will be coming up in the next couple of weeks, for our field crew to come out here and collect that data. So once the field crew has collected the data, what we're going to be doing is that filling in all that information into the GIS mapping and complete that network connectivity to make sure there are no gaps, there are no breaks, which has the actual representation of what's out there in your system. So once we have all that data collected, we complete that connectivity, we do QA/QC reviews, we do a system mapbook exercises with your team, which is a really great opportunity to obtain an input from your staff if there is anything that needs further field verified. A valve has been there, has been buried for really many years, then we send back a field crew out there to make sure if it's there, if it's not there, if it's located, if it's been if it has been moved, relocated, or we kind of get all that institutional knowledge, we verify that, we send our crew back out there to do those verifications and then bring all the data and then have the GIS mapping finalized and delivered. All this is going to, and I'm going to go over the project schedule at the end, but typically this takes about like 4 to 8 months, but for this project, we anticipate this to be completed by the end of May. Once we have the GIS mapping, our staff is also going to be assisting with the purchase of the ArcGIS online web viewer, which is a pretty cool tool that the field operations crew can use it out at the field on a tablet or a phone to identify, where your assets are. If there's a water main break, they know exactly where's the valve to shut it off. So it kind of like gives them a quicker response time. So once we have the GIS mapping completed, for the sewer project, we are going to be doing some CCTV inspections to identify, to come up with the condition of the pipe. And those areas will be identified either by GIS mapping, which is going to give us a good idea of like where your critical areas are, which are the older parts of the village, or where are the areas where the staff has been performing a lot of operation, like a lot of maintenance repeatedly. So we definitely know that these areas are not performing well. So we'll be like doing some condition assessment for those areas. And also, from what I'm understanding is the pump station drawdown testing is one thing that we'll be performing as a part of the project to understand the performance of your pumps as of today. Because over a period of time, the pumps, their performance gets diminished. And we want to see like, if they're designed for 100 gallons a minute, most of the times, like, they over the years, their performance diminishes and we put them in the particular risk category of which pumps are in like a more critical state than the others. With that, the asset management plan comprises of all these different steps. So now we have the asset inventory, your GIS mapping. And then we're going to be doing the risk analysis. And I'm going to go over quickly on the next slide on how we're going to be doing that risk analysis. Once we have the risk analysis complete, we build a 10-year CIP projects list. We go over that list with you all with the village staff and make sure that everything is incorporated and we get the consensus before we incorporate that in the asset management plan. We have the life cycle model, the O&M strategies, the rate study, all this completed before we could submit the draft AMP for you all to review. And if there are any comments, we'll make sure that we'll take that and finalize the AMP before we do a board presentation. So this is the risk analysis or condition criticality analysis, basically to identify which assets need prioritization. So where do you want to prioritize on? So this is a product of the probability of a failure for a particular asset versus and a consequence of failure. So what we look at here is the pipe age material. So if a PVC pipe is, its estimated lifespan is 75 years, and the pipe has been there for like 70 years, we know that it's almost close to its end of useful life. So that is one thing what we look at, but we also look at like the previous maintenance history and also that to make sure that like, if there are any other assets which are in a similar timeline, but are failing one more than the others. We also look at the consequence of failure. So what the consequence of failure is, like if there are two assets pretty much in the same timeline, we see if that one fails, the consequence could be higher than the other. So for example, if one asset, if it fails, your number of customers who are going to be out of service are 2 or 3, but then the other asset, when it fails, the customers who are going to be out of service are going to be 50 or more than that. So we're gonna look over those methodology, on how to come up with those scoring points with the village staff to make sure what is important to you. If there is a critical infrastructure, if there is, when I say critical infrastructure, if there's a school or a fire station, if you lose water, that is a critical infrastructure. We want to make sure that, that takes precedence over the others. Once we have all this, what we're going to be doing is that prepare those risk scores for each asset. And now we exactly know which assets are more critical than the others. So once we have the risk analysis completed, we're going to be developing the CIP projects. Based on the GIS data, based on the risk analysis, based on the condition assessment, we're going to bring all the data in and start developing the projects and where you want to focus your monies on. Like, so for the next 10 years, what projects are critical to make sure that your assets are performing and your customers are served without any interruptions. With that, I think Megan, you have something to add here?
So one other thing to note, when we're talking about CIPs and capital improvement plans, one thing that is really important to know, when you're out seeking funding from other sources like the state or the federal government, having an approved CIP increases your chance for funding significantly. Just in certain state programs, where I know the village has applied for funding in the past and was not awarded funding, having a CIP gives you 10 points extra on that scoring scale, which is huge for the state grants. So doing this also, it sets the village up for success and being able to plan for the future and being proactive, but it also is going to set you up to potentially get more funding from the state and federal government moving forward.
So once we have a preliminary or a draft CIP list prepared, we are going to be meeting with the village staff and going over those projects to make sure that we have covered everything. If there's any other projects that you want to add to that list before we finalize it and include it in the asset management plan. And this is one of the elements of the AMP is the, like I mentioned about the best practices for O&M. We include O&M practice, O&M strategies, plans, and any improvements that are needed. We review your existing O&M plan and provide any recommendations of what is needed based on the data that we have collected as a part of the project. Just a sample of an O&M plan for the distribution mains. Once we have this, the life cycle model task begins, which is a pretty cool tool for you all to, for the capital planning. It kind of gives you that comprehensive look at looking at like multiple assets and understanding when is the right time to repair, replace, or rehabilitate. So we look at like different funding strategies, different budget scenarios to see like how what we need to do today to make sure that all your assets are performing to their desired levels of service, to their desired performance. So again, like I mentioned, we look at different scenarios, do a workshop to go over those scenarios. There is really like an optimum time when you want to repair or replace an asset, right? Like if you replace an asset early, you are losing money because the asset still has a good life. When you're repairing it late, then you're spending a whole lot of money to repair it. So there is like, this tool like really helps with that optimum time as to when an asset needs to be replaced, when an asset needs to be repaired.
So now you to the fun part for me at least. So how do you pay for all of this? So in a utility, there are two ways that you can pay for things, either rates or debt. So in the past, the village has been extremely proactive, and last year our firm helped do a kind of a light financial analysis to look where the utility is. We didn't have all of this information that you're undergoing right now, so it was a little, we weren't able to get a comprehensive view of where the utility is financially. But with that, we were able to kind of get some baselines together. So once we have all of this information that DP's team will be working on, our team will come in and look at it holistically to try to figure out the best way to pay for everything. You'll get a number of different scenarios, either debt and rates. to pay for all of these things that we've identified along with staff to take care of. And again, I just really want to commend your staff. We work with various municipalities across the state, but having some of the proactive, looking proactively, especially from a financial area, your team, you set yourself up for success with this project. So we've already kind of done some of that baseline, and we can really focus the grant funds on all of the field work and all the work that Deep Dee's crew is doing. So we can come in and do a rate study at the end and kind of help you with some options on how to pay for things in the future. Jump back in. So with respect to the project schedule, overall, we're looking up to 14 months from start to finish. We are here in February now. So like I mentioned, we have completed the data assessment and the database design. We are in the process of scheduling a field crew to be coming out here and collecting the data. Once they have that, we're going to be doing the system map book exercises. We're going to be finalizing the GIS deliverable. And that is going to be, like I mentioned, May 2024. Once we have the GIS data, we're going to pick some critical areas in your system or from your staff's input on which areas we want to focus on for the CCTV inspections. We're going to be doing some pump station drawdown testing. That is in a couple of months. And then we're going to start performing the criticality, the risk analysis to provide you with that understanding of which assets you need to prioritize and for the development of the CIP. Once we have all this, we're going to be submitting the draft asset management plan. The asterisk is basically a deliverable that you all will have, so that will give you an opportunity to review and provide any comments before we finalize the AMP and do a board presentation. So overall, 14 months, and then one of the critical success factors from our experience on previous EIA projects is that the state requires that the project be completed within 24 months from the grant acceptance date, which is September 2023. So we have until like August 2025 to complete the project. So this kind of like gives a little bit of an allowance about 45 months for any unforeseen situations, conditions, weather, or whatever that could come to you. But at this point, we expect the project to be on schedule. And then the other critical factor is like able to get the data, everything what we need for our analysis, for the gap analysis, to be able to do data field outputs. And your staff has done a fantastic job in providing us the information what we need to be able to stick to the schedule of what we have here. So thank you for that. And last but one is the previous AIA project, some of the projects that Withers Ravenel has completed in the past. And one of the feedback of what we have received from our clients is that, they have reduced customer complaints. They are able to fix a problem. They have a quicker response time because now they know exactly where their assets are. They're able to have a CIP plan, which is more fact-based and not just like a wish list. And it's just like overall improves the knowledge management and improves the operation and maintenance. So just some quick points before we go on to the funding discussion. So back to you, Megan. So another thing to note, with some of those previous AIA projects, a lot of those communities were extremely successful in getting funding to pay for a lot of their projects afterwards. I think Liberty was the first one on there. They have gotten, how much money Liberty's gotten recently from the state in earmarks? Billions and billions of dollars. Some of that is economic development focused, but a lot of it is just because they've done some of this work to be proactive. So for funding, like as I mentioned earlier, having a CIP can improve your chances for funding. It really just helps your staff to be proactive in going after the funding. You have all the information at your hand. One of the things about writing grants is telling a good story, and having the information to tell that story makes you more successful. A couple other funding opportunities that we've looked at just that may be of interest to the village is the state revolving fund for water and sewer. That's the one where the money has come from. That is one that you can easily apply for grants in the future having this information. Local assistance for stormwater infrastructure, you know, being a more vulnerable community in terms of the environment, is something that you may want to look at. I believe your staff has already worked with our funding team a little bit in exploring some of those options to see what you may be eligible for in the future. And the next two are disaster related. And again, I know your staff has been working with our FEMA specialists on what is a BRIC grant or a resiliency grant, and then some flood mitigation money. So these are things just to be aware of in the future. If you see those, if there's something that the village may be looking at, could look at in the future for additional funding. So with that, do you have any other questions for either of us? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know, and this is probably more of a Zach question. So we've put together a financial model. And when I was listening to your capital improvement plan and your life cycle modeling, how we can dovetail that with your plan. And so it's not, I don't want any of these things to be separate. It should all be interlinked, especially and with our marketing, our lobbyist group too. So
Mayor,
that's something we'll be demanding of you. Yeah.
we can take, once they complete the CIP, the model itself actually has a model for capital improvement. So we can basically import that data from their model.
Directly from theirs, right into ours.
I need some formatting, but yes.
Yeah.
And to include public works also. Absolutely.
We make sure this is a holistic view.
Right, okay, great.
Yeah, we'll look at there is one existing, and we'll take that data and we'll incorporate that in the model and, you know, make sure that everything is on, you know, on the same page.
So, the state revolving fund, first of all, you mentioned grants. Grants to me means they give you the money, you don't have to pay it back.
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
Now, state revolving fund, looks to be, what does that mean? Is it low interest
It's,
finance?
there's some grants in that, there are some
Okay.
that are low interest, there are some that they call it a loan, but that they basically give it you a grant later on. There's a lot of different options out there in that fund. The state, changes the way the program works every couple of years. So it's been different in the past, and in 2 years, it'll be a little bit different. It just depends on, how they're working, but it's a number of different funds available. Of course, you want the grant funds, because you don't have to pay those back,
Certainly.
but low interest loans are also a great option.
Right. And low interest loans that they may forgive part of down the road.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
I guess in the application, you can actually select whether there are no funds available for grants, you can select that, you know, I do not, you know, just not, the state not consider the application if they're gonna plan on getting a loan. So if you're only looking for like grant option, there's like a checkbox there on the application that you put in. If you want to use only the grant program.
JP's talked about that from before, right? Yes, JP has already talked about that, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. If there's anything else you need, please let us know. We're more than happy to answer any other questions.
This is a great presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.